But the problem is, they didn't want to delve into the question of what capitalism is. Some of them even talk about just leaving it as a place marker, the term, without any analysis. The problem with that is that it tends to treat markets and the exchange of commodities as the be-all and end-all of what the system is. And as a result, it depicts most of us as buyers and sellers. People who go to the shopping mall, who go to the grocery store and engage in exchanging money for commodities. And it forgets a hugely important element, the element which is the key to the system, which was at the center of Marx's analysis, which is the market in human labor, or as Marx's technical term, in human labor power. In other words, capitalism depends not primarily on the exchange of goods, because the exchange of goods is not possible without their production. It's the production of goods and services which drives the system, after which they're exchanged. And so once you think about the production of commodities as being central, then you have to raise some fundamental questions. Who produces them? And under what conditions? And what we discover is that the system is a gigantic machinery for exploiting human labor or labor power in the course of producing goods and services in the form of market commodities. Now, when we come to slavery, what we begin to see is that, in fact, over the history of capitalism, there is a range or a spectrum of forms of coercion that accompany the production of commodities. One of the great flaws of the liberal narrative is the idea that free actors enter into exchange with one another. But when you get to the labor market, the market and labor power, you recognize this is not a realm of freedom. This is a realm of unfreedom. We surrender our human rights and our democratic rights when we go to work. We do not have equality with managers. We do not have equality with our employers. We do not have equality with the owners. They have social power over us as their hired hands. And that's a form of coercion. And so with slavery, we simply have critically the most coercive form of binding human laborers to capital, to employers, to managers known as overseers on the plantations. Capitalism is a system of coercing labor. And all I'm really trying to show is that slavery was the most legally and politically coercive form of the domination of human laborers by those who control and run huge business operations. And that's the final point I'll make on this. The plantations of New World slavery, which produce the world's tobacco, sugar, cotton, coffee, indigo, and so on. All of these commodities that fueled the rise of capitalism globally. The plantation was a modern business enterprise. Historians and economists are now recognizing this. They were thoroughly modern capitalist institutions. And within those thoroughly modern capitalist institutions, they had a bonded labor force. A set of working class people who had no legal right to stand up for themselves, to organize themselves, because they were technically owned as commodities. But notice what's happened. We've shifted here from the mere market transactions between goods, which is what the liberal narrative focuses on. I go to the store and I spend money for my coffee. I go to the store and I buy my bread. I go to the landlord and I pay my rent. But rather than that, we've shifted the perspective to that of production, and those who produced the world's wealth. And enslaved people were part of that producing class that produced the wealth of capitalism. And as we'll talk about in a few minutes, this is also why they had social power, because they were producers.
This is so important. So you really specify how, from the standpoint of the market, which is the viewpoint of the liberal analysis, the distinction between a wage worker and a slave is absolute. One is, of course, a commodity, the slave. The other supposedly is someone who is free to choose who to work for. On the other hand, you say what matters is really the standpoint of production. And that's where we realize that the same dynamics that occurred in the plantations with the slaves are reproduced, of course, historically in a different specific way, but with the same logic with wage workers. And this is why I would like you to focus more for us about how is this wealth really produced. And I think this is very important because part of the liberal narrative is to tell us actually who matters historically is the investor, is the commodity owner, is the activating force of history is actually the elite that is capable of, innovating and getting us all this wealth that makes us, our society, so much better than pre-capitalist societies, and how this is ultimately a narrative of linear progress. And instead, what comes out here is that actually wealth is not the outcome of the action of the investor. Rather, it's the outcome of the exploitation of the living labor of the slave or the worker. And thus, the agency has to be understood as not stemming from the elite, but actually stemming from the person who's putting in the living labor. And this is, David, I think crucial because you refer back to the Hegelian analysis of the relation between the master and the slave, saying ultimately the master depends on the slave. And this means that ultimately the autonomy for action and the capacity to break away from this oppression comes from below. So if you can tell us a little bit more about this concept of relative capital, and why is it so important in the analysis of where does wealth come from? Where does our supposed progress come from? And how this really tells us a different story about who counts in terms of social transformation.
Right, absolutely. And let's start with your really important insight about the liberal narrative of progress, because fundamentally, that's what's being challenged here. In that liberal narrative, the growth of markets means the growth of freedoms. The more markets cover the globe, the more people get to be free agents in buying and selling and market transactions. It's a lovely story. It's a myth. And it projects the idea of complete social harmony. We're all being uplifted by the growth of markets. Now, the irony, of course, is that the vast majority of people know that feels wrong. They don't feel they're being uplifted by the growth of the immense wealth of those who dominate the American economy, say. So when you begin to look at the system from the standpoint of production, that then raises the question of social antagonism and exploitation. And I do try to do a serious deep dive into all the evidence on this for modern or New World slavery. Because what we see from the standpoint of production is that those who own the means of producing wealth, factories, mines, plantations, and so on, they cannot reap any profit without the labor they exploit. And if the workers who are producing all of those commodities,
I dare you to let me build
what they produced, there would be no immense fortunes for Elon Musk. There would be no immense fortunes for Ford or General Motors, Apple, Starbucks, and so on. Their fortunes depend upon exploiting the labor of their workforce and appropriating to their corporate enterprises the surplus value, the value of the unpaid labor of those who work for them. And that means that the system, first off, is antagonistic, not harmonious, as the liberal narrative puts it. It means that it is exploitative, not something that is lifting all boats, as they like to claim. But the other thing that you were describing is that it means that the dominant class is dependent on those who produce the wealth. This is the great secret of all class societies, and especially of capitalist society, that those who produce the wealth actually don't need their employers. They don't need that class. They could continue to produce the world's wealth without a class of exploiters. But the exploiters desperately depend on their labor force. Without them, they are nothing. And that, of course, is a complete inversion of the liberal narrative. As you say, in the liberal narrative, the entrepreneurs and the owning class create the wealth, the culture, and the civilization of our world. In this perspective, seen from below, seen from the standpoint of production, it is the world's workers who produce wealth, culture, and human well-being. They, therefore, have this massive capacity to transform the world. And as we'll talk about, it was the enslaved people who overthrew the slave system. It was not liberals who did it. It wasn't Abraham Lincoln who did it. It was the enormous insurrectionary, self-emancipatory struggles of enslaved people. And I know we'll get to that.
In a minute, we will get to the core.
And so what did they propose? Project 2030, okay, you will own nothing and be happy. Now, it's not just about them maintaining control. 2030 also has to do with the inevitability of AI automation and the inability to continue to have just like jobs for all humans, because we're not going to need human labor for anything almost, okay? Like literally for almost anything. You fast forward 50 years.
If you live in a Florida,
you need people. So you're going to have to remake the economy. As much as we all love capital, like you're going to have to do something. I'm not saying communist. I have no idea what you do. I'm glad that I am not in charge of trying to figure that out. And I'm saying that would be the only kind of that would be the only purpose of what they're doing, that I would be like, look, man, somebody's going to have to make these changes. But if you're like, oh, well, who's in charge? Well, Bill Gates and George Soros. I'm like, oh yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Those guys are definitely good actors that have the future of humanity in mind, and definitely are not, going to put their own financial and ambitions ahead of 98% of the humans on Earth. I'm not super on board if those guys are shaping the future, right? But at the end of the day, weakening the United States, breaking the United States, and then remaking the world in a globalized way, that is their goal. Project 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy about it. The Great Reset, all of that stuff. That's where that comes from. That's why they're doing it, right? They don't like that single trigger point in the United States that can blow up their whole control mechanism, right? And because Trump won in Trump just won, and you think that because they lost that election, they went all in, dude? Those guys went all in to win that election. I honestly believe that there is a very high probability that the Diddy stuff, at least in portion, I'm not going to go over that again in this video, but I've told you guys at length why this actually happened to Diddy. But I do think that an additional result of them going after Diddy and seizing all of his hard drives was so that they could leverage all of that blackmail material, right? And be like, you need to go endorse Kamala. You need to go endorse Kamala. That's how you had all these crazy flip-flops. Usher, I'm not political. I got nothing to do. Donald Trump's an existential threat or whatever. Snoop Dogg, he's like, I love Trump, dog. I love Trump. A week later, he's like, anybody who loves Trump, fuck Trump. He's racist. Anybody who loves him, fuck you too. And you're like, what? Or what's happening? And that was all happening all at once, right after Diddy's place gets raided, right? High probability that they were leveraging that stuff. And so they went all in to try to win the election. Not so much as if they really wanted to win, they should have run someone who was not Kamala, but they didn't want to use any of their, or any good candidate knew that they. It's mind blowing, dude. The world is not what you think it is. You know, it's not. Now, their goal is to keep people docile. All right. Like usually their goal is to keep people docile because they can get over on docile people. So when they keep on driving for civil unrest and they keep on trying to destabilize things, that's because they're doing something. Okay. There's something going on. It's not just business as usual because normally they just want people fat, dumb, and stupid. They're not trying to drive, violence in the streets. They're not trying to drive people to go to civil war. Okay. When they're doing that, they have a bigger purpose in mind. And my opinion is this is still Project 2030 and they're trying to break the United States. Okay. Why would they give up? These people who have never lost in their entire lives, why would they give up? Right. And so my point is what would the outcome be here with the Charlie Kirk thing if they commit this murder, right? And then actually, let me rewind. To break the United States and actually have the United States descend into civil war, right? Like a real civil war, not talk, not whatever. I mean, they've already successfully driven the two sides apart to the point where the people on the left are celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. There are two completely alternate worlds now, right? Like you can't tell these people that everything they've ever heard about Charlie Kirk is a lie. They won't believe you. They'll just be like, oh, you're probably one of those white supremacists also. Like there's no talking anymore. They're not ever going to listen to any of us. Someone starts saying something that they find interesting and they go, wait, so what's that guy's? They're all, oh, he's like a Trumper. And they literally will just go, oh, never mind. I'm not listening to any of the stuff that he just said. You know what I mean? They're like, well, wow, I was finding him really engaging and he was having good thoughts. They're all, bet he's a Trumper. They're all, oh, and they'll just dismiss all of it, right? Very similar to how many Trumpers feel about the opposite side, right? I am not one of them, but like, I do understand that is very common on both sides. It's like, dude, I like that guy. You're all, you like that guy? That's like Barack Obama's blah, blah, blah. And they're all, oh my God, fuck it. And they just dismiss everything they said, right? That is a successful operation that they've been running to split us, right? Civil war to happen, hot civil war. That does not come from the left. That comes from us, okay? Like that comes from us. We decide if that happens, right? The left are the ones who are the agitators. They're the ones who scream and they're fine with violence and they go out whatever and then they cheer when people are out. But like they are not the ones that can descend the country into actual like anarchy level violence, okay? We do that. If we decided that we like something had to happen, that comes from us. Now, I will never support that. I will never promote that. I will never support that. I won't do it. But you want to get shot by me? You need to be in my house threatening my family. You need to be like somewhere in my area where my family is threatened, barring, an all-out assault on the country where I'm like, all right, they're coming for the United States. Outside of that, like, you're never going to see me supporting deadly violence ever against other Americans, okay? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that A, it's wrong, but B, I know that's what they want. I know it. I know that's what they want. That's the end of our country, okay? We keep forgetting that Democrats and Republicans, we're on the same fucking team, dude, okay? Like, that's what we need to remember is we're on the same team. And if you wanted the right to start entertaining actual violence that could descend the country into chaos, which would potentially lead to the fall of the government and all of that, okay, this would be a real good start for that. You kill Charlie Kirk, kill Charlie Kirk and then flood the airwaves with all the left-wingers who are supportive of it and they're going, yeah, oh my God, this is great, cheering for it, whatever. It puts murderous thoughts into your head. It puts terrible, terrible thoughts into your head when you see people behaving that way, And we should all aspire to be like Erica Kirk, who, whether she actually believes it or not, is able to go onto a stage and say the words, I forgive Charlie's killer, Like, I watched that clip and I'm pretty good at picking out what part of a person.
Capitalism, I guess the reason why the word is so uncomfortable, it's also because it talks about this capital that in itself the word presumes non-democratic social relations, while if you talk about the market economy, you instead focus on this world of freedom that supposedly is all about our choice.
Americans and others had to be persuaded not to believe their own eyes. For example, if you have a bunch of $100 bills sitting there. That can be called capital. People do that. But it's just money. Is it doing anything? No, it's sitting there. It isn't doing anything. It's just green pieces of paper. So when you say money begets more money, you're saying something that makes no sense. I've been watching this money on the table for 2 days. It hasn't begot anything. It just sits there.
Welcome everybody to FREE, the Forum for Real Economic Emancipation podcast. I'm Clara Mattei, and I'm your host. So the real data about American people's economic reality is alarming. According to the recent data of MIT Living Wage Calculator, 44% of full-time American workers do not make enough to meet their basic needs. This is almost 1 out of 2 workers. The New Urban Institute data tells us that half of all Americans lack economic security. He's written many very influential books. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm so excited that you can help us launch the first series of our podcast.
Well, I'm very glad to be here. I enjoy working with you, Clara, as we have done a bit already in our lives. I'm amazed that you are based in Tulsa. It gives me a chance to...
Rick, so I think what really is striking about your work is how you really show how the method and the lens one uses to look at the world can really change our... So I think with you, it would be really interesting to discuss, the difference between what mainstream economics usually does, which is actually how we take it as a
geographic.
This may be the last ad you ever see, because with the free ad block extension from Capital One
area. Well, by the end of the 17th century, this system, which had existed in Europe, particularly for 1,000 years, modern capitalism.
First question for you is, how come the word capitalism doesn't show up in any economic textbooks for students, or rarely shows up in the news, especially the mainstream news? And how is it that this lack of definitions, right? So this hiding of the very terms that matter really means something in terms of how then we take it as an unavoidable economic system. And then when we do have definitions, as you show in your book, these definitions are extremely misleading. So if we talk a little bit about, why is it that capitalism is rarely mentioned, and when it is, it's wrongly understood, and how can we really understand it for what it really is as an economic system?
Okay, for me, I always find the best way into these kinds of discussions to be historical, to look a little bit historical. Well, modern capitalism, and let's hold for a moment what the definition is. Modern capitalism in the West comes out of the disintegration of a previous system called feudalism. And whatever we know, more or less, feudalism was a situation which had lords and serfs. The bottom of the society, the mass of people, were serfs on the land. They were serfs because their parents were serfs. They were on the land that their parents had farmed, and they were all part of a community run by someone above them called a lord. One of the reasons we have the word Lord in the Christian religion is it comes out of that period of time. The way to help people understand the Lord in the sky was to project from the Lord that ran the show in your little geographic area. Well, by the end of the 17th century, this system, which had existed in Europe, particularly for 1,000 years, disintegrated, fell apart. And the question was, what would come next. And there were groups of people who were very passionate about what ought to come next. These are the people who became famous in the French Revolution, which was a kind of culmination of the end of feudalism and the beginning of something different. And that something different was a situation where nobody would be stuck in the land on which they were born, stuck in doing what their parents did. It was a change that was celebrated by the people then as freedom. As important as the word freedom was to get rid of the old slave systems where people could be property of other people. So the end of feudalism, like the end of slavery, was celebrated as a step for human freedom. Indeed, the champions, both in Western Europe and in the United States, because remember, the French Revolution is 1789. The American Revolution was actually a few years earlier and had many of the same themes in it. Well, the great slogan of the French Revolution was liberty, equality, and fraternity. These are very powerful words, and they were great motivators. Feudalism couldn't survive because it was the opposite of liberty. You weren't free to move.
So I created this indicator which gives me buy and sell signals for
Equality. People would have laughed at that. The Lord lived in the mansion. If you've ever gone to Europe as a tourist, you visit the great chateaus, the great Schlosses in German, the great homes and mansions where the rich lords lived. The mass of people were in no way equal. They didn't have equal income. They didn't have equal standard of living. They didn't have equal political rights. They didn't have equal education. None of it. And so the whole idea was that a new system would be brought in to give people liberty, equality, fraternity, and what the Americans added, democracy. The people should rule, not the lords. The people should rule, and they should rule equally. Not gradation, not some people more equal than what a fantastic idea. And it was the idea that Thomas Jefferson thought was magnificent. And so he kept it. And so did Sam Adams. And so did many of the others who made the American Revolution. And so did Robespierre and Danton and Marat, the great leaders of the French Revolution. Well, why am I telling you this? Because they did usher in a new system. No more lords, no more serfs, no more masters, no more slaves. The new system organized people to produce goods and services, which they always had. But this time, the relationship between them was that of the employer and the employee. Some people would be selling their ability to work, and other people would be buying it. And that was a very different relationship from the slave and the master, or the serf and the lord. And they brought that system in. The new system. You would be free to go wherever you wanted. You could work for any employer who would hire you. And you would be part of this new economic system. They didn't call it capitalism. They didn't know what to call it. So some of them called it freedom. Some of it thought it's the people will finally be in charge. Democracy. Okay. It came at the end of the 18th century. By the middle of the 19th century, 50 years, 75 years later, it was the new system established in Europe. And at that time, Karl Marx reached his adulthood. And so he was living in this new system. He loved the slogans of the French and American revolutions. They were his passion too. Liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy. He was part of the generation that welcomed all of that. They were the generation that included Beethoven and the music he wrote to celebrate all that. The new novelists who talked about what it meant in daily life for people to go through the transition. But here comes Marx's absolutely crucial contribution. He looked around him. He was born in Western Germany, right near the French and German border. So it was already well along the way of capitalism, had overthrown feudalism. He looked around and he said to himself and to those close to him, we got capitalism, it's a new system. This employer-employee system, it's not feudalism, it's not slavery. But did we achieve liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy? And his answer was a very honest no. No, we haven't. And by the way, he goes to London around the time of Charles Dickens. For those of you who've ever read a Dickens novel, Mr. Dickens was showing us how the following is true. Equality, we don't have. Liberty, not in a meaningful sense. Fraternity, don't even imagine it. We got capitalism, this new system, and Marx was one of the early ones to use that kind of language. We got it, but what was promised to come along with it, we didn't get.
This game.
And so the question becomes, for Marx, why not? Why didn't we get it? Is it some special circumstance? Is it a bad leader? Is it any one of the details of life in Western Europe in the middle of the 19th century when Marx is doing his work? And Marx reached an answer to that question. And the answer was no, it's not about this or that detail. Inside this economic system are the mechanisms, the relationships which prevent liberty, equality, fraternity, and democracy. And the corollary that comes from that recognition for Marx had two parts. Number one, I am now talking as Marx, I am going to explain to myself and to everybody else what it is about capitalism that makes it prevent liberty, equality, fraternity. The statistics that you, Clara, began with are the proof that not only in Marx's time, but here 150 or 200 years later, we still have grotesque inequality, grotesque no freedom if you haven't got enough to have a secure job, if you don't have enough for a decent home, to give your children a proper education. We don't have the liberty, we don't have those conditions. We certainly don't have equality, and we certainly don't have brotherhood. Lord help us in this country at this time, where we are doing things to poor people, to non-white people, to immigrant people that violate every religious, moral, and ethical commitment we could have. And we watch in the old biblical country of Israel even worse. So Marx's idea is, I'm going to show you why that happens. But he didn't shy away from the implication of what he set out to show you. If I can show myself and you, my reader, how it is that this system precludes itself from being why we made the revolution against feudalism, then the conclusion has to be we need system change. It won't do to change the taxes. It won't do to rearrange the rules of employment. It won't do all those things that people keep trying to do who are at least honest enough to see the inequality haven't worked. Marx knew why. Because you don't face the system. You don't change the system. You don't change the failures and the flaws that system has built into it. So he becomes a critic of the system. That's why he needs the word capitalism. It's just a word to capture the system built around this need to have money, make more money all the time. And that becomes the core.
Rick, if I can stop you a second, because I think it's very interesting to note how Marx's critique of his contemporaries that he called bourgeois economists is extremely timely to understand how it is that most of our colleagues in economics are capable of hiding all of what you said, are capable of hiding the fact that the system is indeed non-democratic and deeply structurally immoral, right? And I think what's interesting here is that we should explore the fact that these economists stay at the level of the surface, what for Marx was the level of the market, in which indeed we were different from the feudal subjects because people did have the capacity to move around and decide who to work for, right? So it's very interesting that Marx is capable of understanding why is it that mainstream economists are able to mesmerize us so easily. It's because indeed at the surface, it does seem like we can decide whether do we want to work for Starbucks or do we want to work for McDonald's or who do we want to work for. But actually the point is here, and you know quite well, that if we are free from our feudal lords, we are also free from our means of production, which means that we are then compelled, not anymore by physical force or by law, but we're compelled by these impersonal forces of the market to find a job, whatever it is, to pay for our house, our food, everything we need to survive. So this impersonal compulsion is what is unseen by economists because it's much easier to just focus on the freedom of choice that we see at the level of the market. And this coercion only really becomes visible if we look deeper to what you are about to problematize and to what you think, following the Marxian tradition, which I also follow, actually explains the definition of capitalism. If you stay at the level of the market, as Marx told us, the realm of liberty, equality, and Bentham, right, is actually seems real. But we need to look a little bit deeper and realize that actually there is a fundamental coercion rather than freedom, which is the characteristic of the system.
Yeah, I love that. You know, it reminds me of the story that people tell here in the United States about when they were little and they went with their father or their uncle to the park, and there they encountered an ice cream man who had ice creams to sell. And the father or the uncle would look at the child and say, well, you have your choice. You can have any flavor of ice cream you want as long as it's vanilla. And so the child has to try to grapple with the fact that they're being told that they have a freedom, and then their freedom is very quickly constricted because you need to say all that stuff about freedom, because that's why you made the revolution against feudalism. But you can't really allow it. The young person who doesn't want to work for someone else doesn't have the freedom to go into production for themselves, because that requires property, which the system is unlikely to give them, as it doesn't give it to most people. They have the freedom so long as they work for somebody, but they don't have the freedom not to do that. Or, as I would argue, they don't have the freedom to get together with others like themselves and set up enterprises in which there's nobody is the employer. They are their own employer. What a thought. Even though that exists in all societies for thousands of years. People have been doing that. So what you had coming out of this.
We have got to the point where literally anybody
history is a profession of economics whose devotion is to keeping the focus of everybody on things that don't fundamentally touch the way the system works. So your freedom is you can go into a store and you can pick items off the shelf, whatever you want. Look how free you are. You can buy an iPhone. You can do it. Yes, this you can do. But if you want to do something that has to do with the core way the system works, you don't have any freedom at all. You have all the freedom to pick everything you want as long as it's all vanilla, as long as it's all the same. And let me drive home what that same is. If you look at production, the production of goods and services that we all depend on, our food, our clothing, our shelter, all of it, we have a name for where those things get produced. They get produced in enterprises, in workplaces. We have the words for that. And those are organized in capitalism in a very systematic way. The way they were organized in feudalism with lords and serfs, and in slavery with masters and slaves. In capitalism, it's employer and employee. And that's very different from feudalism. You know, it's different from slavery. The employer doesn't own you. The employer cannot tell you what to do because you happen to be born to these people who were serfs, and therefore you are ipso facto another one. Those things are changed. And the system loves to focus on that, loves to attack feudalism and attack slavery because we are different from that. And Marx acknowledges all of that. He's interested in that. But because of his training with Hegel and the notion that everything is contradictory, he's alert. Because what is different will, if you look at it carefully, demonstrate to you that it's also and at the same time not different. And here we go. What's not different is very obvious once you ask the question. Because in capitalism, like feudalism and like slavery, a tiny group of people sit at the top of this society. They run it, they control it, and they become wealthy off of it. And that's why they have so much wealth, because they're in charge of it. They take as much of it as they can for themselves. They don't give it away to other people. And so it turns out that just like there were very few lords and lots of serfs, and very few masters and lots of slaves, there's very few employers and lots of employees. According to the U.S. Census, 3% of Americans are employers. The other 97% are not. And let me remind you of what employers do, just so you see the stark reality. Who sets the prices for all the goods and services you and I buy? The employers who make them. They set the price they charge to the wholesaler, who then takes a bit for himself and charges the retailer, who takes a bit for himself, and then we buy it. But the retailer doesn't set the price, and the wholesaler doesn't, and I don't, and you don't. The employers, 3%, they decide when the price will go up, when the price will go down, when the price will stay the same. You know what that isn't? It isn't democratic. We have not participated in making the decision about what the price should be. Yet we are affected, obviously, by what the prices are. Who decides how much income we have to spend? The employer. And if the employer doesn't want or need us, we get no income at all. He has the power to separate us from our income, thereby plunging our family and us into misery and difficulty and crisis. And this is not democratic. And are you surprised at inequality? Of course not. these people at the top being in the position of deciding what to produce, what to pay the worker, what to price the output, they make themselves wealthy. They always have. And they have another incentive. You need to keep your employees poor because you don't want them to have an alternative. They need to come back every Monday when the weekend is over to resume the whole game. They can't be allowed to accumulate. So you work on them. You keep doing everything you can to economize on the labor costs.
Did you know that simply choosing products from Israel can have a big impact?
Works that way. And let me turn it the other way one more time. If you want to get rid of poverty, of inequality, if you really take seriously the revolutionary slogans of Washington and Jefferson, or Robespierre or Danton, or any of the others, your problem is capitalism. Your problem is the setup. You can't really be surprised that the people at the top use their position to become wealthy. If you don't want them to be wealthy and everybody else be poor, you can't let them or anyone else occupy that position. If the people want less inequality, and the Gallup polls and many other polling show that the American people want less inequality, overwhelming. If you want it, then you can't allow capitalism, because it is the solution that gives you the problem. It is the way of doing things that has to go.
Yes. And I think this is hugely important, is that the few times in which we do hear the word capitalism is to qualify it. Crony capitalism, monopoly capitalism, or say it's really the issue with neoliberalism. It's a redistributive problem. Here, what we're trying really to say is that economic growth, capital, right? Capitalism has the word capital. Capital, in terms of what we see in terms of money, in terms of wealth, what we can quantify as GDP growth, rests on capital as the social relation that is specific to our historical moment, which requires the majority to not get to have a say on what is being produced and does not get to keep actually the full outcome of one's labor. Because guess what? That surplus that Rico talks about in his work, and which is the core of Marxian understanding of why the system grows so much, that surplus is the outcome of the unpaid portion of the workday that all of workers, no matter how well paid they are. And so I think really here it's where it's interesting, because capitalism, I guess the reason why the word is so uncomfortable, it's also because it talks about this capital that in itself the word presumes non-democratic social relations. While if you talk about the market economy, you instead focus on this world of freedom that supposedly is all about our choice. So I think that is crucial. And Rick, I would like to go back to what you said a minute ago and focus perhaps on an issue that again really exposes the non-democratic nature of our system, which is inflation. And I think there it's very interesting.
Well, let me start with the inflation. The issue of inflation seems to me best understood by remembering very simply that it is the employer who decides whether and when to raise or lower a price. The workers are not part of that process. No one ever calls a worker into a room and says, hey, what do you think the price is of whatever we produce here? A worker would be finding that a very bizarre moment. Never happens. So the employers do it. Now, that means they have the responsibility. And right here is the problem. Because if what prices are going up, then the population confronted by that risks becoming angry at the capitalist because he's the one who sets the price. The capitalists have understood this from day one. They must develop a whole series of explanations that blame somebody else. And that's what all of this is about. That's all that it's about. So it's the banking system, or it's the government, or it's the workers, or it's anybody but me. And here's the irony. The general answer to the question, why does a capitalist do anything that a capitalist does? The answer is to maximize profit. That's what we teach. I've taught in business schools. That's what the business school teaches the capitalist how to do. You raise prices if it improves your profits. You lower prices if that were to improve your profits. And if enough extra people buy at a lower price, well, then it may improve your profits. But the honest answer that capitalists are taught is you raise or lower the price depending on one thing, its impact on your profits. You're not told to ask, what will that mean to the general public? That's not your concern. You have neither time nor education to do it if you wanted to, and you don't. And by the way, the same applies to employment. You hire or not people if it improves your bottom line. If you're better off having fewer workers, you fire them. If you're better off having more workers, we make the employment of human beings held hostage to the capitalist, profit-driven system. And there again, we blame everybody else. Look at the businesses today. They are allowing Mr. Trump to do what he does, and they are already beginning to blame their price decisions on the tariffs that they're being. That's the way this is always done. We should never be fooled, because what is in the minds of a worker is all the other things that ought to be taken into account when you're thinking about these questions, but which conventional economics pushes out of the story, pushes off the table. Let me use the example of artificial intelligence. Let's suppose there's an artificial intelligence mechanism that allows your workers in an enterprise to become twice as productive as they used to be. What will the capitalist do? He will buy that.
These are those rhombohedron crystals in your penis.
Technical mechanism, the AI, and he'll fire half his workers. With half the workers, each of them now twice as productive, he'll have the same number of outputs, sell them at the same price, get the same revenue, but his profits will go up because half of the revenue he used to have to pay half his workers, he doesn't have to pay because he fired them. He will make more money, and that's what he'll do. And so we're all worried that AI is going to hurt employment. Stop. Let me show you. Very simple arithmetic. That employer had an option, an alternative. That employer could have said to all the workers, I'm going to buy the AI machine, and now you're all safe. I'm going to pay you exactly what I paid you before, but you're going to work 4 hours a day, not 8. Because you're doubly productive. In those 4, you will produce as much as you used to require 8 hours. The output will be the same. You're all working half time. I will sell it for the same price. I will get the same revenue, and I will give you the same wages. My profit won't go down. I'll have the same profit I had before. Wow. What would that mean? It would mean using a new technology to fantastically improve the leisure of the working class, who are the vast majority. But the system will never do that. The system will not allow the technology unless the capitalist chooses to buy and install it, which he will only do if it improves his bottom line. There you have, as stark as you could want it.
Yeah, and I also think, Rick, in your example, I mean, the point is that if we have one nice employer that decides to actually, share, you use the benefits of AI to kind of maintain the same rate of profit, we know that the problem is that his competitor, instead of actually having the work only 4 hours, will have the fewer worker work 12 hours and be more productive. So, of course, this employer will ultimately potentially not maintain his position and become a worker himself if his business fails. So I guess here the point is that the bottom line here is that technology, of course, is not the issue in itself, but technology is not neutral. It depends how it's used. And to go the route you're suggesting, I would say potentially we would need a complete overhaul of this trap that we've constructed based on the accumulation of profit. And so we would need really different relations of production, right? So ultimately, I think your solutions to this anti-democratic
Hi, assalamu alaikum, sisters and brothers. Sulman Rahim here, Veteran of Covenant. Okay, brothers and sisters, it's been a year now, and we're finally home after 40 years in Arabia. I'm reporting to you from Arabia. Finally home after 40 years, right? And so we've been here a year now. And there was an agreement made, a former slave master. He said, we had a choice, stay here or leave, right? So we chose our inheritance, Arabia. So we left, and half the original people decided they wanted to give up their inheritance and traded for a place in America in reconciliation with their former slave master. That's their choice. They chose, said, we don't want to go over to Arabia. We don't go to where it's sand and all that stuff. We want to stay here in America. We've been here all our lives, been here 40 years, born here, right? And we can make peace with our slave master. Okay, so they decided to stay. And so after a year, right, we're getting reports of how things are going over there. And it doesn't sound too good. How things are going over in America with their reparations. Because they was given, they got 6 states, I believe. Yeah, see? Yeah. Yeah, they got those 6 states right there. That's what Farrakhan told them. You know, they was listening to Farrakhan. Farrakhan promised them, you know, they stay there, 6 states, right? Had their own land. And they can make reconciliation with the former slave master. They're not devils. They're not devils. They're human beings. They just had a rough, you know, they were just, you know, did some things wrong, but now they, you know, they're gonna make amends and make reparations. So 6 states, and in addition to that, they gave everybody $1 million. Everybody stayed $1 million. Okay? Say, thank you, Farrakhan. They're so happy. Thank you, Farrakhan. Thank you, Farrakhan. Man, you got 6 states. That's what you promised us. We got 6 states. They're thanking you. Thank you, Farrakhan. Right? And you know, I mean, this was a year ago. They got the 6 states. Thank you, Farrakhan. Right? Everybody got $1 million. Everybody $1 million. And they're rejoicing. Oh man, they're so happy. Hey, we came here. We made it. We got America, man. We got reconciliation for a master. We got 6 states. Everybody got $1 million. We're all rich. That was a year ago when we left. So we're in Arabia. They're still back there in America. And now we're getting reports a year later. This was the way it was a year ago, man. They were so happy. They were so happy. Right? And now we get reports of what's going on right now. Let's see. Oops, it says a power failure. Great power failure in those 6 states. Power failure. And just those 6 states. Right? So, and now they had a big and massive, they came asking to turn the power. Well, why can't they do it? Oh, Farrakhan didn't train anybody. He was telling you about 6 states, but he never prepared you for them. So nobody knows how to do it. How to turn the power grid back on. So now he's begging, man, master, can you come and turn this thing back on for us? I mean, you would think that if he told him 6 states to promise him that he would have prepared him for it, right? Their schools and education, whatever they needed for that. But I guess they didn't, because they said over there now he's begging the former master to come and turn the power back on. And then what? I mean, this is all that's happening now. I mean, I'm getting these imports in now. A year later, it's like they're coming in every hour. Power grid failure, right? Then say, oops, crop failure. All of a sudden, there's no, they say, they looked at the farmers, when they doing the farmers said, oh. So then they had master, what's happening here? How come you know, right? Our crop. They found that the land they gave them wasn't that fertile. A year later, nothing's growing. Crop failure. And now they master, what's happening here? Right? And then, I mean, all these things, every hour that's coming in, right? And then they look, you know, and they had, you know, a year ago they had plenty of food on the shelves, right? And now, they look there now and all the food's gone. It's gone. She said, what am I going to do here? Food's gone. The house is empty. So he said, Master, we need some food. Well, how come you can't put your own food? I mean, you want your own country. You got your own states. That's your country. Now you run it. What are you calling us for? Right? So they'll be praying, and then, oops, no fuel. There's massive no fuel there. Well, you got to buy your fuel. You got to produce your own fuel. What you calling us for? You got your own 6 states now. What you calling us for? Go and get some fuel. You got money, right? You got your own states. So you got to get your own. What you calling us for? You said you wanted your own, so now you got it. And you got your reparations, so we don't owe you anything anymore. We don't owe you anything anymore, so what you calling us for? We don't owe you anything. You said you agreed to 6 states and $1 million per person. You took that instead of your inheritance, what you call the Abrahamic Covenant, Arabia. You know, your brothers and sisters, they left. They took that was offered to them. They took it, and you said no. I want this instead. So now you got it. So what you calling us for? Oh, no communications. Oh man. No communications, right? No medical facilities. So what's going on, Master? Wait a minute, hold on. That's you. What you calling us for? That's yours. You got to handle that stuff. You want us to handle it for you? You want independence, now you have it. I mean, wow, this stuff was coming every hour, man. Instead of like a year, they was celebrating. And now they crying and begging the master, hey, we got all these problems here. I said, wait a minute, that's yours. Why don't you come about your problems? You have to work those out. Right? No transportation, I mean, no planes, nowhere. We don't know about fly the planes and to drive the trucks and the boats and stuff and to go and get this stuff. Well, what you done that for? You wanted this, you got it. So go ahead and get to train your own pilots, build your own planes, build your own boats and right? You see what I'm saying? Transportation, build your own trucks. What you calling for? Yeah, Master, you said you wanted 6 states, you got it. You want $1 million per person. That was your reparations. So then if you didn't pay people to take care of this, how is that our problem? You're independent now. You're really free now. Oops, no fuel, the gas station's empty. I can't drive, man. And no gas. Man, wow. All this stuff happened like for a year. They thought that everything was great, and all of a sudden everything ran out. So I guess what happened? Everything was there when they got it, and then it ran out. They had to, some of them replace the fuel, to get the farms going. So they was left with that stuff. The factory was full. I mean, warehouses full. Then you had to keep. They thought that was just going. I guess they thought it was just going to be there, just by itself. They didn't prepare for it. See? And they ain't trained any engineers and scientists and architects and stuff. They business. They didn't train anybody. So Farrakhan, he told you he's going to get this for you, but he didn't prepare you for it. He didn't get anybody to handle this stuff. So what was that all about? So now he asked the master, hey, don't call on me. You was here, you had it when you was here with me. You said you want independence, you wanted reparations, so you gave it to you. Well, calling your brothers over there. They left, they handled their own business. You said you want to stay here. Right? See? You don't have any professionals or technicians, scientists, doctors, none of that. See? I mean, that's what, because I mean, if you're going to set reparations, you should be preparing for that, right? So if he was telling you about reparations, you should be preparing for it. If he said God said that's where he's going to get you, so if God told him he's going to get that for you, then he should, like when God told Noah there was a flood coming, to only build an ark, so he started building an ark. And so you should start preparing for the 6 states and the reparations, but apparently you didn't. And so now, it does say, look, hold it. We want total separation. Look, we don't want you calling us no more. We don't want you calling us no more. Because you're wearing us. You want your own country. You got your own land. Right? You got money, $1 million, all this stuff, right? And so now we got to protect your money and everything too? No, you have to really create your own money. You have to do all these things, your own wealth, not ours. Right? So we're going to cut you off from that too. It's all economics. So they go and tell it. They tell all the people all the white folks, right? Because all the black folks, now all the black folks is either in Arabia or in those 6 states. That's the solution. You had to be one way or the other. There couldn't be no integration, that kind of stuff. That's the deal. You just said one or the other. So all the black folks are there, and ain't no integration, that kind of stuff, right? Black folks are there, one or the other, so they're there. So they said, okay, right? So they just said, we're going to take that money because we don't know what y'all doing over there. You have your own money, you have to find your own wealth. So what they do is they tell all the white folks, say, protect your money, right? Transfer your money into gold. Transfer all your dollars into gold. Right? Now remember, they gave everybody $1 million apiece. So everybody got $1 million apiece, right? And so they transfer it to gold. And then what happens is that what they do is they start just printing money. White folks just start printing money. You understand what that means? That's inflation, right? Because if you got $1 million of gold, a million ounces of gold, say $1 million ounces of gold, understand this, and you got 1 million certificates, then you say each certificate is worth 1 ounce. If you got 1 million ounce, each certificate is worth 1 ounce. Understand that? If you got 1 million ounces of gold, and you got 1 million certificates, each one of those certificates is worth 1 million. If you want to say trade with the certificates, each one of the certificates is worth 1 ounce of gold, right? But if you take and print, you say you got 1 million ounces of gold, and you got 1 million certificates, each one. But say you print twice as many certificates, you got 2 million. Well, then each certificate is only worth 50 cents now, because you got to connect that to the gold. Well, you print 4 times, then each one's worth a quarter. So the more you print, the less they worth, because those certificates has to equal what the gold is. You understand? So the more you print money, the less, right? The less they're worth. So if you print twice as much money, right, there's less gold. You understand? So if $1 is worth 1 ounce of gold, which that's right, then if you print double that amount of dollars, then each one's worth half an ounce. You understand? That's what printing money without increasing their wealth does. That's inflation. So what happens is they keep printing. They get down to where $100 is worth a penny. But see, that doesn't affect their people. They try to protect their money because they transfer their money to gold. So gold still has its value. It's just the dollars don't. It still got the same amount of gold. But the dollars, they get down to a penny. So you can't buy it. You had $1 million, now your $1 million worth of $5. That's all it's worth. Maybe $1. Hardly worth anything. Hey, that's our money. You gotta have your own money, you control your own wealth. You can't keep coming at us what you're doing. And you think they wouldn't do that? Yeah, you've been a Gaza lately? You see what happened to the trees they made with the so-called natives? Kept telling me you had a forked tongue because they kept making trees with them, then they broke the trees. And took their land and genocide and everything else. But no, they wouldn't do that to you. See? Because now you have, your money's worth nothing. They haven't lost anything. Because once that money's worthless, it's no good, right? Then you bury it up, throw it away, it's worth nothing. the people still got to go. And even if they take it, hold on the money, hope to increase again, they just use another different certificate, use another form of money. So it's still worth nothing. That $1 million you had, you was so happy with it now, it's probably worth maybe $1. So you can't buy anything with $1. Plus the economy's crap because everything is failing, and you don't know how to repair it. You don't know how to build communications. You don't know how to do any of this stuff. You don't know how to engineer, build a house. You don't know how to do anything because Farrakhan didn't. Right? He didn't prepare you. He told you he'll give you 6 days. He told you, listen to me, right? So now you're broke, and your economy is gone. You have no food, no electricity, no power, anything, right? It's not their fault. They gave you what you asked for. You still had your inheritance for that. And then they closed the border. Because you want to try to get back into America now. We want to come back in, Master. No, we don't want you back in here. We sorry, we want to come in. No. That's you chose. You stay there. They closed the border, so you can't get back in here. You can't get back in America, into what you call your land now? Swaziland or something? Farrakhan. Maybe call it travel land. Farrakhan. They met the Farrakhan, right? So they close the borders. You can't, because now you're hungry and everything else. Your money's worthless. Oh God, come back, Master. I come back work for you. I work for Popeyes. I do anything you want. No, we don't. Remember, now blacks either they over in Arabia or they in that land. There are no blacks in America, any places, just in that land that you 6 days. And now you're starving. You ain't got your money's worthless. Nothing works, and they close the border. Right, and then you see Master, you on the phone, you talking to the guy that you kept treating, help you. Hey, we finally got rid of them niggas. Finally got rid of them. See, on the phone. Yeah, it worked. We sold them no reparations. We sold them that used car. You turned the miles back and everything else, and they bought it. See? They could have had a BMW. They could have had a Lamborghini. They sold it for a BMW that looked good. Damn thing didn't work. And now they're starving, living in tents. Praying. So what? Then what next? What we gonna do, Farrakhan? You told us to take reparations, so we did. But they gave us everything that we asked for. What we gonna do, Farrakhan? What we gonna do? Pray. That's his answer. Pray. That's your reparations. Like Elijah Muhammad said, he had a big picture. We leaving, and blacks staying on the shore, the ones stay behind, and they was whooping their ass. Right? Because they thought you think they want to give you some land and take care of you? You think they want to do that? And go bankrupt, give everybody $1 million. How much that is? If it's 17 million, that's 17 million times 17 million times a million is like $17 trillion, I think, something like that. There. Then they're gonna do all that for you. They want to get rid of you. So now they have succeeded because they closed the border. What you gonna do? You gonna fight to come out? They closed the border. They got the military around there. They finally got rid of you. No more black problem, no more Negro problem anymore. One group's out of here, another group that's here. They're gone, and our hands are clean. We gave them what they wanted. Well, anything. Okay? God honors contracts. Remember he honored the contract with Jacob. Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of soup to Jacob, where was Esau's inheritance, and God honored it. Okay, Jacob, it's yours. You're the one. And that's the deal. Because he ain't your friend. Pharaoh ain't your friend. Pray, pray, pray. That's the answer. And this homeland you was promised, you rejected it. So now you got what you asked for. So if they gave you reparations today or tomorrow, how would that scenario not play out like that? Well, they say, okay, we got it, you got it. Tell me how the scenario wouldn't play out like that. And tell me why they wouldn't do it. They love you so much, they're gonna say, okay, we're gonna take care of them. I mean, why should they go out their way to take care of you when you was right here? You was working at Popeyes and then they get up on Section 8, all that stuff right here, because they're trying to get rid of that stuff right now. Trump's trying to get rid of all that stuff right now. Because they're closing on you don't realize it. Anyway, that's just, that's what's happening over in America. Wow. Boys come here. Disaster over there. And, oh, I just got a call. Oh, wait, hold on. Really? You serious? Our ambassador just got a call from I don't know what they call it Conland or something. I forgot what it is, something you call it right there. That 6th day. They begged us to come and help. Can they come over here? Can we come and get them? Really? Can we come and get them and bring them? Oh no. Now he went and asked Master Farah Muhammad, right? He said, no, hell no. We ain't going to get them. And I agree with that. Yeah, the Master said he said, let's call him, and he passed the word to Master Farah Muhammad. Master Muhammad said, send him back. Master, no, we can't come and get you. You made your choice, live with it. Or die, whatever the situation is. Wow. I can't believe that. They actually, right, sent a message over. I don't know how they did. I don't have any communication with them. Somehow they got the information over to them. Said, we please come and get them. Nope. Said, no, tell them no. And don't waste time communicating with us anymore. You got your land. You got your reparations. You got your money. You got Farrakhan as your leader. Yeah, tell him. Talk to him. Let him straighten out for you. He didn't want to sell you the idea. He was a salesman. So you on that idea of reparations. We told you. Right? Suleiman, right? He was the messenger to you, telling you, look, man, let's go home. You said no. You chose not to. Okay, well, since that's a sad story. But I guess that's it. Is that it? Oh, they're not getting more reports on okay, he says that was Master Farah Muhammad's final decision, and I think they closed communications off from there. So, like I said, brothers and sisters, we got those rides that came in. All that came in today, man, came in fast. After a whole year. Total collapse. Now they're begging it. Somebody help them. We can't do it. Maybe Master help you. We won't do it. Assalamu alaikum. update, brothers and sisters, got another late report in that they said, well, if you want to come and get us, well, we at least send them some food. They begged, said, please send us some food. Matter of fact, I'm saying, we got to send them a damn thing, nothing, zero. He said, please just send us some food. No, I just got that in. He says, if you can't come and get us, please send us some food. He says, no. He refused. That's the report. I just got the information from the ambassador. He said, they sent that, and he's read it to me. He says, no. He said, please, just please send us some food. He said, no way. You made your choice, case closed. Okay, just got that in, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum.